Hey again everybody, this is Caleb, and in this video we're going to go ahead and link up our user interface to our view controller file. Then we're going to go ahead and set up the code that we need to essentially add a show to this label above. So let's go ahead and open the assistant editor, and we're going to start by linking up everything that we need. And first of all, we're going to link this shows label. So right click on the label and drag over to the view controller and drop it right above the override of view.load, and we'll just call this shows label and press enter to connect that. Looks great. Next up, we're going to go ahead and set the random show label to have its own property, and we're going to call it exactly that, random show label. Push enter. Next, we're going to go ahead and set this to be its own IB outlet, and we're going to call this BingeBot spoken label. Connect it like so. Then we're going to set up our text field here. So right click on the text field, and we are going to call this add show text field. Cool. Next up, we're going to go ahead and right click our add show button, and we'll call it that. Perfect. Connect that up. Next, we're going to go ahead and take our random show stack view, okay, which you may have to access over here, but right click and drop it, and we'll call this random show stack view. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to actually be able to set this entire stack view to be hidden until we need it, and vice versa. Very cool. Next, we're going to go ahead and set up our add show stack view, like so. Beautiful. And finally, we're going to set up our shows stack view, like so. Shows stack view. Very cool. So with all of this in its proper place, this is looking really good. We now have all of our elements all linked up the way that we want. Now we're going to set up the functionality for adding an actual show. So what we are going to do is we're going to first need to create a way for us to store the names of shows. And in order to do that, we're going to create a variable called shows. And it's going to be an array, and we're going to store strings inside that array. I'm going to go ahead and just initialize it from the get-go to be an empty array of strings. And now every time we add a show, we can add an item to this array of strings. Now, if you remember, an array is kind of like a container, kind of like a box that holds values of a single type. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be able to add in each show to this array, and then display that array's data in a label. And I'll show you a cool little function that's built right in that will let us do that. So now that we have a place to store our show, what we need to do is essentially to set up an IB action for when we push this button. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and right click, drag beneath view.load, and as you can see, it automatically identifies that this should be a label if it goes below view.load. If it goes above, it'll identify it as an IB outlet, and that's simply just a typical iOS convention, and it automatically does that for you in Xcode 10, which is pretty cool. So let's call this add show button was pressed. Sounds pretty good. And we're going to go ahead and click connect. That looks awesome. And then inside of this, what we need to do is we need to basically verify that there's actually text in this text field, because if there's not really a point to us adding anything. So let's go ahead and let's first use guard let, and we'll say show name, and that's going to be equal to add show text field dot text. Otherwise, or else, we're just going to return. Okay, and I know that you haven't had much experience with guard let, but basically guard is a way for us to protect our code. And I can say I want to ensure that add show text field actually has text. Because if you look, it is optional. And since it's optional, that means that there may not be text. If there is not text, we're going to call return, which actually breaks us out of this function and prevents our application from crashing. However, if there is a value in this text field, we're going to set this constant show name to have that value. After we have the show name, what we can do is we can call our shows array, and we can call dot append new element of type string. Well, we have one. It's called show name. Pass that in, and now we have an array with shows. And you know what? Just for fun, let's go ahead and let's print shows after we do that, and let's go see if it works. Let's build and run this, and then we'll do some final work to actually update the interface. So let's pull up our simulator here, and we're gonna watch the console, because every time I add a show, we should see it appear in the console here. So let's type Scandal, click Add Show. Boom, there it is, it got added in, very cool. Now let's delete that and type Breaking Bad. Let's add the show, and look at that, we have 2 items now in our array. Let's add Community, that's a funny show. And there it is, so it works. Now we just need to add it to the interface here and set it up so that, you know, things for the user experience are better. Like every time we add a show, we want to clear it out so that we can add a new show without having to delete it. We also want to do some other stuff. So let's stop this from running. Let's close the console and let's get rid of this print statement. So we are now successfully adding values to our shows array. But what we're going to do next is we are essentially going to update this shows label with all of the values that we need. And I'm just going to put a comment here called update shows label, and that will be a function we'll add in just a second. But before we do that, we want to essentially set the text field here to be blank after we push the button. So type add shows text field dot text, and we're going to just set it to be an empty string. That way, every time we push the button, we'll clear out the text and it won't be an issue. Next up, what we're going to do is we're essentially going to write our function here, update shows label. So type func update shows label, and inside this function, we are going to go ahead and essentially set our shows label to display the values in our array. And so in order to do that, we're going to type shows label dot text, and it's going to be equal to shows. And this is where I'm going to use a really cool function of arrays of type string. We can type dot joined with a separator of type string. And what that's going to do, if you look at the definition, I guess it doesn't have a definition. It's kind of weird. Basically, well, you know what? Let me actually delete this. I want you to see it because it's a good definition. Good definition indeed. If I type dot joined, there we go. Returns a new string by concatenating the elements of the sequence, our array, adding the given separator between each element. This is a perfect space to add a comma and a space after each element in our array. So go ahead and type quotes here, and we're going to type comma space. And what that's going to do is every time we actually add an element, it's going to add a comma and a space. But the cool thing is it only does this if there are more than one element in the array. If there's only one, it will just show the single element, and every following element will add a comma and a space, just like a list. Very cool. Let's uncomment this because our function has now been written. Let's build it and let's verify that that functionality is in fact working. And we will continue adding some stuff to this. So here we go. When we do this, let's add Breaking Bad. When I click Add Show, it should clear out the text field so that it's empty, and it should update the label up here to include Breaking Bad. Let's check it out. Boom, that is awesome. And let's, well, continue adding shows. How about Better Call Saul? Boom. And as you can see, it adds a separator of a comma and a space. That's very cool. Scandal, White Collar, Antiques, Roadshow, if you're into that. As you can see, you can add shows and they are properly updating, and we're putting commas and spaces. This is looking really, really cool. Let's keep going. How about Teen Titans Go? Pretty cool. And as you can see, as we add more space, the stack view is automatically expanding as we add more items. So let's just say show 2, add show, the best show on earth ever recorded. Let's add a nice long one. And look at that, we get more lines. Very, very cool. So this is definitely working, but now I want to stop building this and run it to just take a look really quickly at the kinds of things that are showing from the beginning. So when we launch the app, we don't have any shows. We definitely shouldn't be showing this what to binge thing because there's no shows, so that doesn't make sense. The only thing that should be showing is enter a binge-worthy show and the add show button, right? We're going to start by hiding the shows stack view and the BingeBot stack view. So inside view to load here, go ahead and type shows stack view. Shows stack view dot is hidden equals true. And then we need the BingeBot, or what is that called? What did I name that? Random show stack view. There it is. Random show stack view dot is hidden equals true. So now if I build this, I just pressed Command R. If I build it now and we take a look, you'll see that we should only see the add show stack view. Very good. That looks awesome. So that's cool. That's now in its place. However, when we add a show, we need to do some things. We need to essentially re-show the show's stack view. So let's do that. Shows stack view dot is hidden equals false. That looks pretty good. Next up, we want to basically set it so that once we have at least 2 shows, we're going to make this appear again. And we're going to go ahead and set it so that when we click the button, it will choose one of the 2 shows. If we've only added 1 show, it doesn't really make sense for us to show that, simply because you don't really need to choose. You have a single show. So in order to verify that we have more than 1 show, we're going to check if shows.count is greater than 1. We're going to go ahead and set the random show stack view dot is hidden equals false. And as soon as we've added a second show, this stack view will appear. So let's go ahead, let's build and run it one more time, and let's see if things properly appear as soon as we add values. So of course, after we add a show, the show's stack view should appear with an updated label. So let's add Breaking Bad. Boom. Okay, cool. There we go. And Grey's Anatomy. It's another show. Let's add it. And look at that. It shows up. However, Adventure Time isn't even an option, and that default data is showing up when it shouldn't be. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make these hidden by default, these 2 labels, and then we're going to make them appear again when we actually call our button function. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set in this if statement here, let's think what we're doing here. If shows is greater than 1, meaning we have 2 shows, the stack view should appear, but these 2 labels should still be hidden until we click the what to binge button, which we'll do in the next video. So go ahead and choose the BingeBot spoken label and set it to be hidden. And then we're going to set the random show label to be hidden as well. Now in the next video, we're going to set up this button to choose a random element from this array and then display it in this label. So let's build and run this. Let's make sure that it's working the way that we want, and then we'll head over to the next video. Okay, so let's add a show, white collar, cool, that looks great. NCIS, looks good, and look at that, our button appears, our labels do not, and of course, this button's not gonna do anything. I can add another show if I want, and it's not gonna do anything, but in the next video, we'll set it up so that when we click this button, it will choose a random show, unhide those labels, and then set that big label with our show's name. Very, very cool stuff. Let's head over to the next video, and let's do that now.